Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a top 10 list of the best places to expand in Victoria 3. And before we can really do this, we do have to talk around about a background idea, and that is infamy. Infamy is effectively a resource that you spend in order to be able to conquer areas and create subjects and this sort of thing. Generally speaking, you care about infamy. If you didn't care about infamy, this list would be completely different. What this list is a list that is sensitive to trying to be as efficient as possible with your infamy in regards to expansion, and this is the criteria by which we're kind of using to evaluate which countries are best. And so it is important that we talk about how you get infamy, and also, what are some heuristics that you want to keep in mind. So infamy is based off of several things, the infamy of any sort of play. So if we go for Conquer State here in Nejd, you will see that there's a few modifiers here. Number one, we have the base value that you get for the type of play. You will have a base value of 5 for any conquest, and have a base value of 2 for any dominion, and 3 for a puppet. So generally speaking, it's cheaper to make a dominion and a puppet, but then you're not really annexing the territory. But eventually what you can do is you can annex them once they are done being a subject, that you could annex subject. And the annex subject play will have, in particular, a modifier of 0.25. And so it is cheaper to dominion or puppet first in terms of infamy, and then annex. This is important to keep in mind, and will inform kind of our ideas. The second thing to note is that it is multiplied, this base number is multiplied by population of the target. You care about the population of the target, and it does get capped per state. We'll get more on this later, but you care about the population of the target for the cost. It does not kind of evaluate or use GDP, and it does not use resources available. So this means you will want to conquer places that have relatively low populations and high GDP or resources available, with a sort of asterisk in there. And then finally, we will have a sort of, if you are a great power, you will pay less, or if you are recognized, you will pay less infamy, but the bigger you are, you will pay more infamy. And if your target is unrecognized, you will pay less infamy from taking stuff from them. So as another general heuristic, you want to take stuff that is on unrecognized powers. Now, Sikh Empire is an unrecognized major power, and so is the Egypt. So we will have the same modifier, and it's based on population, but the population notably has a cap. And so this cap, if we come here and we go and we are going to take a state from Egypt, and we are going to conquer Low Egypt, we will see we have to pay 22.5 infamy, and it is multiplied by the population of the target, which is multiplied by 5. 5 is the cap. And so it's 25, it's the base value is 5, multiplied by 5 equals 25, and then added to these modifiers for 22.5. Now the population of Lower Egypt here is going to be around, I think, a little over 2 million. It's 2.67 million. If we take a look over here, in Punjab, again, this population is 13 million. So it's like 5x of the population in Lower Egypt. If we go to conquer Punjab, we will notice that it is also 22.5 because it hits the cap, and so it's multiplied by 5 times 5 times these modifiers. So in general, what the heuristic will be is you want to take places that are very resource dense and have almost no population, or you want to take places that have an enormous amount of population, okay? And so this is the way to move forward. Secondarily, another way to move forward, or another thing to think about, is if someone is a subject, you will also accrue less infamy, and you can actually get someone as a subject without expending infamy to dominion or puppet them. And the way you do this is you bankroll them, you get obligations, you use the obligations to pull them in your customs union. This will cost 5 to 6 infamy in order to do, and then once they are in your customs union, then you can go and dominion them, and you will pay a quarter of what you would normally pay. So if we got Persia to be a protectorate first, by pulling them into the customs union and then convincing them to join, then we would be able to dominion them for like 7.5 infamy, and then annex them later for a little bit more than that, or 2.5 times that. But overall, it's much less infamy. And so this is a way to expand with less infamy. And so notably, the break-off point is around 10 to 12. You pay less for unrecognized powers to pull them into being a protectorate. And by the break-off point, I mean, so for example, in Ecuador here, if we were to dominion them, it would be cheaper just to dominion them than it would be to protectorate them, pay 6 infamy for the protectorate, then dominion, then annex. It'd be faster or cheaper on the infamy to dominion or annex. But once this number is up above 10 or 12, it's more efficient to pull them into the customs union first. One notable thing about this is generally unrecognized powers are harder to pull into the customs union and then protectorate because they very often have the defending the borders strategy. If they are defending the borders, then they will have this huge negative modifier that is impossible to get through in regards to trying to get them through. Here you see there's pursuing a strategy of defend the borders. If they have this, it is impossible to protectorate, and so this means in general, if it's kind of close, you'd rather dominion unrecognized powers, knowing that they are more likely to defend the borders, whereas New Granada is, for example, less likely to defend the borders relative to Persia, who will often be on it for most of the game. So, just to reiterate what the heuristics are, we want to go after dense, low population targets, or we want to go after extremely high population targets if the thing we're trying to get is more population, and if a state is really, really, really big, like in the case of Persia, it starts to become the case that once you're paying a really large chunk of infamy, that maybe you don't want to actually expand through dominioning them, and you want to expand diplomatically by trying to protectorate them first, so that you pay less infamy. So this is the strategy as it regards to infamy. Briefly, I think it's also important to note that another part of our heuristic is we're trying to be efficient as possible in regards to the infamy, not expand as quickly as possible, because you just want to keep declaring wars constantly, always have a war running, and just be very, very efficient. Like, if you have an enormous war that costs 50 infamy, even if that's, like, relatively efficient, now you're going to have to wait for your infamy to decay, because you can't diplomatically incorporate anyone when you're over 25 infamy, or it's very difficult, and so this means that, you know, it's more important to be patient. In the long run, you will develop a much larger kind of acquisition if you play it slow and steady. And so we aren't necessarily trying to bite off the biggest chunks with each sort of expansion as much as, because we can just expand again with someone else that's small, someone else that's small, someone else that's small. And so this kind of also informs the idea the huge hulking chunks are maybe not the way to go. So let's jump into the list. This kind of is on point because number 10 on this list is going to be Persia. Now, Persia is one that I'm not entirely sure I like on the list for a couple reasons. The reason it's mainly on the list is because they will usually be defending the borders, and so diplomatically acquiring Persia is very inconsistent. If you can get it, it's preferable to do them diplomatically, because in order to dominion with the idea of annexing them, it is 31 infamy, and so it will cost quite a lot of infamy overall to dominion them and then annex them. It'll be maybe 45, 50 infamy overall, and this is quite a big one. They have okay resources. The things to write home about, you know, they have a decent amount of, you know, iron, lead, coal, these types of things, but the thing to really write home about is they do have opium, but opium's a little bit more of a later game kind of consideration. They have opium, and there's a ton of oil that appears here. In the western portion of Persia, a ton of oil will appear here. I think it's maybe around 140 to 160 oil total. I don't know the exact number, don't quote me on that, but this is the main idea. However, I think that Persia was almost an honorable mention because with Persia specifically, if you take it slower with them, you know, you can still try and get them in diplomatically, and the big payoff is the oil. That's the biggest reason why they're really, really good, and you won't be able to utilize that until later on, and so even if this is a really good expansion spot, I don't really like it as an early war. Okay, in 9th place, we have dominioning the Netherlands, and this is a little bit of an interesting one, a little bit of a unique one. We can't have a play against them, so let's take a look how much infamy it is. It is 25 infamy to dominion, but we cannot do it, at least not at game start, because they start out as a major power. They almost always will decay into being a minor power, and the main attraction of the Netherlands is not their population or resources themselves, although they do have a little bit. It's not really a lot. They have a coal mine, they have good fish here, but the real reason that you go after the Netherlands is because you automatically get their subject, the Dutch East Indies, and so what you do is you you dominion the Netherlands, then you annex the Netherlands down the line, and then after you annex the Netherlands, then the Dutch East Indies is a subject, and the Dutch East Indies has quite a bit of resources. You know, if we come into the tab over here, and let's sort by goods, not all goods. We're going to sort by industrial goods, and we will take a look at coal. There's a decent amount of coal, notably Borneo has a ton of resources. There's a decent amount of iron in Brunei and in Celebes, of which Dutch East Indies has a claim on, and there's quite a bit of sulfur here. In addition to there being a lot of wood here, if we sort by hardwood, there is quite a lot of wood here, and they also have a bunch of little subjects, and each of these subjects get 5 free construction, so it actually will grow to be a pretty large GDP in your market, and very often they will fully expand out their agriculture, which in turn contributes to your market and makes it so you can be more industrial oriented because you have these subjects that are building way tons of agriculture. And so this is quite strong, but it is a sort of more of a long-term one, because first of all, you have to wait for them to come down to being dominionable anyways. They have to come down to being a minor power, and then you have to annex them 5 years later, and then Dutch East Indies you could annex 5 years later if you want access to the resources, or you could just let them colonize Celebes, keep them in your market, let them build out all the arable sort of stuff, and sort of influence your market in a positive way that way, but they are quite strong. They come in at number 9. For number 8, we have one where we care about population here, and this is going Sindh into the Sikh Empire. Sindh notably has quite a lot of sulfur. It's one of the highest sulfur states in the game. There aren't too many really high sulfur states. I think the biggest one's over here, but what it also has here is, I think this might be the only province in the game that has a plus 20 plantations throughput modifier, and also opium. They have 100 arable land potential in total, and they have opium as one of their potentials, and so this is pretty good. This isn't what we're going for specifically, but we have to go through Sindh, and it's important to note this one is timely. Notably, Sindh has a population of 2 million, which is kind of not a good number, because it means we'll be paying quite a lot of infamy, for the province itself. We can dominion and then annex, or we can take the state. They are just an unrecognized power, so you pay a lot less on that front, and so if we take a look, dominioning them with the intention of annexing them makes sense, and so does conquer state. But the main idea is we want to get into the Sikh Empire, and we want to go after Punjab specifically, because Punjab has an enormous population. It is one of the highest pop states in the game that is not inside India or China. Actually, I do believe it just is the highest pop state in the game that is not part of the East India Company or China, which will have a few higher pop places, and so going for them is relatively cheap. They will often decay. They start out as an unrecognized major power. They will often not stay that status, and if we see conquer Punjab, it's 22.5 infamy. It will generally be less, and we can also go for the dominion, which is only 27 infamy, and then I think it's like 12 to annex them, this sort of thing. And so going after them, subjugating them, mainly to get the pops, can be extremely strong. Now, this one is a little bit timely, because the East India Company will often either go after Sindh or the Sikh Empire. You can go through Makran and Kalat as well to get to Sikh Empire. This is a good place to get pops, and it comes in at number 9. Or sorry, number 8, rather. In 7th place, we have New Granada. Now, New Granada did get a little bit stronger in this patch in 1.3 because it got opium here, but it is just a relatively solid place. It has a lot of mining potential, and this is very true with all of the New World, specifically, especially in South America. They have a really small pop relative to their resources. They only have a population of 1.6 million, and they have a ton of arable land. And what's going on here is the arable land is not filled, so it's not fully filled, and everywhere else, pretty much, the arable land is going to be fully filled out, and it's going to be fully occupied. And so in the New World specifically, you have a bunch of arable land relative to the amount of infamy you're getting, and this will be quite good. It's a good amount of resources. You also have the Panama Canal, and so overall, this is a very good one. It is dominioning with the intention of annexing them here in New Granada. It's 14 infamy for the Dominion. This is also very true with Venezuela, which will also have oil. Chile, which will be able to colonize down here. They have gold. They have a ton of resources. Chile might be even a little bit better. I just feel bad about kind of not... if you annex it before they colonize all this, then the colonization's free game, so you kind of feel like you have to annex it kind of quickly, and then it feels bad, but... Okay. One of the downsides of all of the New World states that's important to note here when we're talking about New Granada is that if you're European and they accept your pops, they will siphon off your pops. So your pops will go over here, they'll boost the population, and then before you annex them, you will have to pay again for population that was in your country. Eventually, you can kind of siphon the pops back off, but there is a really powerful modifier coming out of these places. If we take a look at the unused agriculture, or sorry, not the in the population tab, we will see the migration attraction is going to be really high from unused arable land, which will be positively modifying it. We haven't done pause, so no migrations happened, but this is just something to note. So in 7th place, we have New Granada, kind of with similar ideas for like Venezuela, Peru, or sorry, Chile and Argentina, much the same. Okay, in 6th place, we have a really interesting one, and that's Mahra. Or Mahra. And the reason for this it is very cheap to take. For this one, usually I think you want to conquer it because the context of what's important here, it's not a lot of infamy. But what you have here is a place that you can take if you are a really small country that does have sea access, because there are 0 battalions and 0 flotillas for Mahra. So all you have to do is build 1 boat and 1 battalion, and then you can conquer Mahra. It's not really about having Mahra itself. It's got 1 lead mine and a little bit of agricultural stuff. This isn't what it's about, but it's about what it gives you strategically. It gives you an interest in Arabia, and you're adjacent to Oman. So the idea is Mahra into Oman, and once you get Oman, Oman will give you a strategic interest in the Zanj region, in Persia, and Oman will have, not the best stuff. They will have non-zero stuff. Notably, in this province here, it doesn't have a lot of resources, but it does have natural harbors, which gives shipyards building throughput. If you don't have one of these in your country already, once you annex Oman, this will actually be pretty good because you will be getting the 10% shipyards building throughput, and so Oman's really solid on this part. But what it also gives you is, another front through which to colonize. Once you annex Oman, you can go through Zanzibar here, and so strategically, Mahra is very useful. And a secondary shout out here is Bahrain, which will have around 50 oil. It is a split state between the Omani Trucal Coast, the Trucal states, and Bahrain, where in total there's 80 oil here. But this, much like the other one, much like Mahra, will have 0. Let's state in Bahrain. It will have 0 battalions and flotillas defending it, so you can land it for free, and it gives you a ton of oil late game, so really, really like the Bahrain take. Nejd also has some oil, so for oil considerations, it is okay. But yeah, the main idea is this is one of the expansion spots you could do if you're incredibly small and you're incredibly weak and you got nothing going on and you got 1 boat and a dream. You can go Mahra into Oman. Notably, Mahra also has a land route that you can go into down here into Ethiopia and snake in through here for colonization reasons. And so because of that, Mahra is strategically really useful, even if it's not really high on the resources. Okay, in 5th place, we have one of my favorites, which is Brunei. Now, all of Borneo is really good, and so this is kind of a shout out to all of Borneo, but specifically Brunei is especially good because a ton of oil, gold will appear in the western portion of Brunei, oil in the eastern, so gold will appear here, extremely strong early game. They have a really high logging camps. They give you access to dyes if you don't have it, also access to sulfur if you don't have it. This is probably the easiest / best sulfur take if you don't have access to it. They have iron mines. The gold is the really big one, but on top of all this, it's also adjacent to Lanfang, which, okay, what's the point? Why is being adjacent to Lanfang important? Lanfang is in the Great Qing market at the very start of the game, and so this will give you an adjacency to the Qing market, which means you'll have fewer convoys, which is pretty important in 1.3 with the convoys nerf, and so grabbing an adjacency to Great Qing is tremendously useful, and there's not really, by far, Brunei is the best sort of one to give you access to it, and by far, Great Qing is the most valuable person to have a trade adjacency towards, and so for this reason, going for Brunei almost every single game is going to be extraordinarily viable and extraordinarily strong. And so for that reason, Brunei is, on top of also having access to gold. You'll notice gold is a very consistent theme in several more of these moving forward. It is going to be scoring pretty high here with number 5 spot. Okay. In the number 4 spot is actually a country or a play that I don't make a lot. And the reason for it is it's California. Now, California, generally why I don't do this a lot, because I always say to myself, well, I'll diplomatically incorporate Mexico and then I'll get California anyways. trying to be all cool, I'm pretty sure you should just take California. The reason being, at the start of the game, it has almost no pops. If we come in here and we look at the population here, it is 63k pops. Taking it only takes 7 infamy if you're starting as a GP. Let's see, to conquer state California, 7 infamy. And what you get is a state that has absolutely insane agriculture, 300 potential, notably has cotton plantations, so we got something good to build, although it does have a bonus for agricultural throughput, which is applying specifically to wheat farms. It might apply to livestock ranches, I can't remember. It also has logging industry throughput. Now that's logging industry throughput, not just hardwood, which is important to note. It is a very strong modifier. They do have the negative state construction efficiency modifier and infrastructure modifier, but it's only a 10% modifier. It's not that big a deal, and this will be an incredibly good place to take. They have the logging camps here. They have also iron mines, but the big things that you can't see here. Well, I mean, this 300 arable land is pretty big, but also what you can't see is 12 gold mines potential here, which is absolutely huge, especially in the early game where you're not building a lot of industries yet. Your construction hasn't ramped up. Just randomly rolling and getting 5 gold fields is incredibly strong. It's going to boost your economy a huge amount, and also 50 oil here, which has not yet appeared, making California one of the best pickups. And on top of that, much like how Borneo gave us, you know, kind of land access to Qing, and it's by far the best way to get land access to Qing for the purpose of trade. Eventually, the USA is going to pick up a lot of this land if the USA is having a good game. And if that's the case, then California is probably the best take you can make in order to get an adjacency to the USA in order to have better trade. And so California is extraordinarily strong. I underutilize this in a lot of my runs, and I should go after it a lot more. It gives you a lot of gold and resources, and also, you know, it gives you an interest in this region if you wanted to protect Mexico and look to kind of diplomatically go after Mexico following that. You know, it's harder to get a native interest over here, and the USA is going to be coming after Mexico. The strategic region, the strategic region is, you know, up here, and which is what the USA is going to be coming after, and so you having an interest in this region makes it easy to protect Mexico if you want to, this sort of thing. And so for that reason, California is extraordinarily strong, and also Mexico is a pushover at the start. It's very, very easy to take stuff from Mexico, even though they seem like they should be stronger, just in terms of how much of the map that they are currently occupying. Okay, before we did the top 3, I thought I would do some shout-outs for some honorable mentions. Number 1 is going to be a war that's actually not that efficient, but it is the best war you can do, and that is transferring the East India Company plus transferring a bunch of stuff from the UK. This will give you 120 infamy. It's not very efficient, and so on that ground, it just kicks you over 100 infamy. You're no longer playing the low infamy game when you do this, but this is the absolute biggest play you can make. Especially if you like transfer Australia and Canada at the same time. It's really, really big, and you humiliate the UK so they can't retaliate later in another play, and you look to humiliate all the GPs and juggle humiliations. This is kind of the high infamy play, and so I thought it was just worth shouting out in particular. Another one is going after Mexico. You can dominion them at game start, and it will give you 52 infamy, so this is something you could do, but it's just a really large amount of infamy. I think you could try and acquire them diplomatically. They do have a lot of good territory. We did mention California. Nevada is also extremely good because 15 gold will appear there, and so it's one of the better gold places as well. I think it's tied for first with the place that has the most gold, and it has iron and logging camps as well, in addition to some negative modifiers. You know, going after Mexico at the very start is very, very reasonable as well. Especially, you have to do it timely because the USA will come after them and take away a lot of their most valuable provinces. But this is, you know, kind of a decent shout. I just think it's better to try and acquire them diplomatically, and perhaps just take California, look to protect them, acquire them diplomatically. Another good shout is Congo. Congo is very little infamy. There's actually quite a lot of rubber here. There is a positive modifier for, I believe this is just hardwood, but you get negative state construction efficiency. just dominioning them so that you can annex them later, mainly for strategic reasons, but it's also just pretty efficient because the dominion on them is only 3.5 infamy, so it's not a lot. You get a decent amount of resources, but strategically it's useful because this gives you generally another front by which you can colonize in the colonizing, kind of sphere. You can colonize Basque Congo once you get it, and you can try and push in and get nice cuts through the Congo, and so often you will do this more for strategic reasons rather than it just being like straight up the most valuable place. And the final honorable mention is Brazil, which is one I actually want to play around with a bit more. You can dominion them just for 35 infamy at the start, because at game start, they're still a minor power. They will very quickly become a major power, but not if you dominion them, but they will not be eligible later for you to dominion. Now, in general, I kind of like the idea of acquiring them more diplomatically and doing this sort of thing, but often that can fall through. They can just get too big. They can defend the borders, this sort of thing. And so maybe it's the case that locking them in with this sort of make dominion is particularly strong. They have a ton of resources, in the form of wood, just about everything. Let's kind of just take a quick look at their industrial resources. Like iron, they have a ton of iron. Notably, they are one of the few places that has 20% iron bonuses. They don't have any sulfur, and they should have, do they have lead? They have a decent amount of lead, and they also have some coal, but the iron mines and the wood is really what you write home about, and they do have places that have 20% iron mines building throughput, which is kind of rare modifier, and so it's pretty strong, and so dominioning them, looking to annex them relatively early, is quite strong. The thing is I think it's better to go for, 3 of the smaller guys, maybe, than it is to just straight up go for Brazil. But this is something you could do on game start if you are powerful enough to do it. If you're a power that's strong enough, their military is not too strong. It's only like 80. And so going after Brazil is a pretty good shout. One thing to watch out for, again, with all the South American countries, I believe we talked about this when we talked about New Granada, is they can siphon off your pops, especially if you're European. And man, oh man, Brazil has a ton of states that have really an enormous amount of arable land. Let's take a look. 227, 172 available, 39 available, 119, 232, and so they will siphon off pops real quick from you, and so this is one of the downsides. If this wasn't the case, I'd rate them very highly, but they only have a population of 4.5 million, which is why, they don't take a lot of infamy to go after, despite the fact that they are recognized, and there's a ton of resources relative to that, especially, I think we should highlight the wood. There really is quite a lot of wood here, and so that is very strong, and I think Brazil's one I need to try out a little bit more. It might be way, way, way better than I think, but this is kind of our final honorable mention here. So onwards and up to the top 3. In third place, we have Bolivia. This is going to be a timely one because eventually they'll form Peru-Bolivia, but they will get as a subject Peru for free, and then they will annex Peru, and so when you get Bolivia, you basically get Peru and Bolivia, and there are also a ton of resources here. Namely, there is gold here. They are gold mines. They're already built out. There's a little bit more gold discoverable, but you see there's a ton of sulfur, there's a ton of iron, and these sorts of things all throughout. There's also a decent amount of wood over here, if I recall correctly, and so, overall, it comes out to being an enormous amount of resources between the two. Once they become Peru-Bolivia and you just annex them, this is extraordinarily strong. It is one of the strongest plays in the game, and it is because there's only a population of 11 million, you just go after the Dominion on them at the very start, and it is only 12 infamy for all this. For hundreds and hundreds worth of mining, enormous potentials in terms of arable land, and it'll be quite strong. Now, the problem with this territory is almost all of it, if we come into the build thing, almost all of it is subject to construction efficiency and infrastructure negative modifiers, but we don't really care about that much, and also the auto queue seems to care about how long it takes to build buildings, and seems to build in these territories less, and so you just use this as a resource slash arable land type of hub. You don't build your manufacturing here, which is fine, but just kind of getting these gold mines very, very quickly is really strong on top of, all these resources, a decent amount of pops. It's just very, very, very strong. One of the strongest, obviously, if we're talking about it. Okay, in the second spot, we have this into South Africa through Zulu specifically, although Gaza seems fine enough. Zulu is a little bit better because it has 62. Now you can puppet your way in if you're trying to get through here faster, or you can dominion your way in and then annex. The reason is you want to get through Zulu into Transvaal and Oranje. So you can puppet so that you can get access later, much quicker, or you can dominion if you're looking to play the slow and more efficient on the Infamy game. And what you get in Transvaal is one of the very best states in the game. Transvaal in particular has 104 iron, it has 60 iron, 104 coal. It has a positive coal modifier without a negative construction efficiency or infrastructure modifier, which is big nice. But also 12 gold will appear in Transvaal. They might have tweaked these numbers in 1.3, and 15 gold will appear in Oranje, which has a lot of coal as well and a lot of iron, and together just this enormous like resource hub that's very, very easy to get into and is generally kind of cheap as far as the Infamy goes because they are insignificant powers over here. You know, if we take a look at how much it is to go after Transvaal, just conquering it is only 15 Infamy. Dominion and into conquer is going to be 5.9, which is generally kind of the preferred way to go, I feel. And they are also European here in Transvaal and Oranje. So it will only take 5 years to incorporate them on top of all that. And so it is one of the best ways to expand, you know, your coal and iron, and it is why playing any start that doesn't have a lot of coal or iron at the very start of the game is, like, not that bad, because you can always go after these guys. They're extraordinarily easy to get into, and this just, it's 27 total, you know, potential gold mines. It's just absolutely insane. Okay, and finally, in first place, we have going after Chinese provinces, namely Beijing into Shanxi. So we have Beijing here and Shanxi here. Beijing has the Forbidden City. This is an absolutely insane type of thing. Now, this will cost quite a lot of infamy, but remember what we said, you know, kind of when we were at the start. Let's see how long it's 22.5 for all of these. They'll all be 22.5. At the start, we said it was a function, how much these things cost in terms of infamy is a function of pop, but it hits the cap at 2 million. In Beijing, there's 15 million pops. And so it is extraordinarily efficient when it comes to grabbing pops. And when it comes to grabbing pops, there's really only two choices. There's, can I declare war on China? And if you can, you go after Beijing. And there's, you know, Sindh into Sikh Empire. I guess you could slap around, you know, the UK for South and North Bengal, and this would be another consideration. But for the most part, it's going after Beijing. On top of all this, when you go after Beijing, you generally take war reps from China. And this is extraordinarily strong as well, but we get all these pops, we get a little bit of lead, we get some arable land too. It's pretty good arable land. It is wheat farm, so building over it will only fire 5k pops, which is kind of a China problem, not our problem. But this 15 million pops, this is the best place to get pops. You get war reps off of Great Qing. This is like classic. Almost every min-maxed run probably has taking Beijing and war reps in it, followed by the second half of this taking Shanxi and war reps. The war reps from Great Qing are going to be around 35k at the start of the game. They're pretty easy to enforce on. You just like do a bunch of landing tricks, this sort of stuff. And then Shanxi is probably the best province in the game. Actually, let me rephrase that. It is the best province in the game when you exclude all of the monuments that you can get. Again, the Forbidden City in Beijing gives you 50 authority and 20 legitimacy from including the head of state and government, and Shanxi has just straight up like the most resources in the game, on top of 30 oil, which has not yet appeared here. They have 116 coal mines, 96 iron mines, sulfur up to nearly 51. Notably, it is way better to have one level 51 building or one level 52 building than it is to have two level 26, because you will be able to get to the max economies of scale. So having these ones really tall is extremely valuable as well. But on top of this, you will get agriculture throughput modifier and some infrastructure, and the agriculture throughput is pretty nice on these wheat farms that you can build in Shanxi, but is mainly the huge amount of resources, and again, like around 15 million population, and so being able to go for 30 million population over the course of 2 wars, only spending 45 infamy to do so, and also getting 35k in war reps each time for 5 years. This is an absolutely insane type of way you can go about things. I think every min-maxed run, it might not include a lot of the other previous ones, but it just like has to include taking Beijing and Shanxi and also war reps off of Qing. And that has been our top 10 list here. If just kind of quickly going through it, in 10th place we had going after Persia, which I often don't do, but I think is really strong. Notably, it is one of the stronger ones kind of later on, when you are starting to care maybe a little bit less than about the infamy and you really need the oil. I think I usually try and diplomatically acquire Persia, but I think you can go after dominioning them and it's okay. Next up is the Netherlands, which is actually one of the better ones for your market. When you dominion them, you get the East India Company, which doesn't have, it's not about the pops here, it's really about the GDP and the resources here, which are quite substantive. There's a lot of resources, a lot of wood. It helps you kind of going after Borneo as well. The Dutch East Indies as a subject or as a dominion will normally kind of go after these guys, and so long term sometimes you can get some annexes off. They'll annex these boyos. These boyos that they have as subjects will get 5 free construction. It's all good. Next up we have Sindh into Sikh. This is mainly going for the Sikh population, but also this place additionally also has the 20% agriculture and 20% plantations throughput, which is absolutely insane. They can build everything but opium, if I recall correctly, silk, dyes, this sort of stuff. So I didn't even mention this as much as I should have, but this is a really, really good just kind of for going for agriculture in addition to pops. And I think Sindh is the only place in the game that gives plus 20% opium throughput and also has opium available, or 20% plantations throughput and has opium available. So that one is notable. You get a lot of pops there. Next up is New Granada, and very similar to it is Venezuela, Argentina, and Chile. Probably New Granada, then Chile, then Venezuela, then Argentina. But the main idea is you're getting a lot of resources because these pops aren't filled. With New Granada specifically, you do get access to opium, and this is very, very, very strong. There's opium down here. And you can also get access to the canal, and they just have a lot of resources. There's not any 51able resources, but it is quite a substantive amount of resources here in New Granada. Next up we have Mahra, which is mainly about strategic value and not in particular the fact it's mainly Oman. And Mahra is so you can get to Oman if you only have one boat. And this is an expansion plan that I think is really useful to know about. And then once you have Oman again is more strategically useful because it allows anyone to get this 10% shipyards building throughput here in Laristan or Omani Laristan. Once you annex it, which is tremendously useful, the Truco Coast will have some oil in it, not very much, but you can go after Bahrain as well, which is kind of included in this idea. And it will also give you Zanzibar, which is pretty solid because it gives you another front into the Congo here or into sub-Saharan Africa. In 5th place, we have Brunei. Big things about Brunei is I think it's 8 gold in this province. Notably, it is a split province with Sambas, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe part of North Borneo or part of Sulu, North Borneo. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think so. I think it's just split with Sambas, but it does have gold up here. It does have sulfur mines. It has iron mines. It has a decent amount of logging camps. It's really good for dye plantations, and kind of more than all this, it does give an adjacency to the market of Great Qing because it's adjacent to Lanfeng. You can also go after Sintang, which has gold, which is pretty nice, but the land adjacency to Great Qing is tremendously useful. In 4th place, we have California. California notably has a ton of gold. 50 oil will appear here. They have decent resources, just very, very, very solid. And in the long run, it will often give you an adjacency to the United States for the purpose of trade, or you can use it to protect Mexico because of your native interest there, and then look to eventually diplomatically incorporate Mexico as your sort of idea. With going after California, very high value state, also arable land. Very nice that they do have the cotton plantations, but they also have throughput bonus on agriculture, so you can use them for, building out wheat as well, and it'll be quite efficient. Then we have 3rd place, Bolivia. Just a ton of resources, a ton of arable land potential. There's rubber, there's sulfur, there's iron. I think there's a little bit of coal, but not much. Maybe there's no coal. Oh, there's the 20 up there. But Bolivia will eventually incorporate Peru, so you only pay for Bolivia. You wait for them to incorporate Peru, and then you annex all of it, and then you feel good about yourself. Next up, we have kind of the South African shuffle. You go through Zulu into Transvaal and Oranje. Enormous amounts of coal and iron on top of 27 gold mine potential eventually. And finally, in 1st place, we have Beijing into Shanxi. You take the war reps and the Forbidden City. This is mainly about population. You get a huge amount of population once you get multiculturalism, which of course is meta. Going into Beijing is just extraordinarily strong. The Forbidden City is really strong. 20 legitimacy from including the head of state and government, which is especially good in 1.3 because it'll prevent a lot of revs, but also 50 authority. And then Shanxi is the best state in the game. If you do not include monuments, and it's like not very close, they have 30 oil that hasn't appeared yet. They have like over 100 coal mines, 96 iron mines, a bunch of sulfur mines. It's just tremendously strong, and it all, of course, does come with 15 mil pop, an enormous amount of potential in terms of the arable land, and if that wasn't enough, we have the agricultural throughput as well. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, / hit the notification bell, and other than that, have a good day.